You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be back in the saddle with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for making us your first listen. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. The Texas Bowl now in the rear view as the Red Raiders hammer Ole Miss 42-25. An easy argument to make that it maybe wasn't even as close as that score indicated. And Chris, it was the Red Raiders' night, really, in so many different ways, man. You finish your year with 4 straight wins, year one under Joey McGuire. This on the heels of an announcement of a new contract for Coach McGuire that you alluded to yesterday, and then we saw announced by Texas Tech. So, man, it wasn't the Rose Bowl, but it was coming up all roses for the Red Raiders in Houston.
Man, Cowan, I guess running off a few hours sleep, so I guess it was earlier this morning technically, but it's just it was a great, I guess, yesterday and then early this morning for Texas Tech football in so many ways. That was just one of those games that felt like you were starting to really kind of kick the door in a little bit. I mean, you've into the season now with a 4-game win streak, and the score could have been a lot worse. I think you played harder than they did, and it shows. And this is back-to-back years in bowl games where you take it very seriously, and it's emotional for all kinds of reasons. And man, it was a juiced atmosphere. The Tech fans were really, really into it. I cannot tell you how many people that I saw before, during on the sideline and after the game that listened to this podcast, including Joey's soon-to-be son-in-law. He listens to us all the time. Joe, shout out to Joe, man. He's our new favorite New York bro. So
here we go. What up, Joe?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So he met me before the game, but I'll tell you, to sum the whole thing up, and we have so many different things we can talk about, but if you want to know what Joey and his family mean to like those kids and how much they've invested into each other in just like a year's time, the game's not even over. And after that last interception of the game, and there's about 30 seconds left, and so the game's technically not even over. And as those defensive guys are coming off the field, every one of those kids is coming over there and hugging Joey's wife, Debbie. And if that doesn't get you to understand how much that Joey and his wife and family are invested into the program and those kids, I mean, they're reciprocating it. I mean, it's just awesome to see, man. And it's just a fun night. And I'll take this any direction you want to go.
Man, we could take it so many different directions, but first, just about how about Texas Tech ownership of the state of Mississippi? Wish it wasn't such a bum state, but nonetheless, we're carrying it right now after a win over the Bulldogs of Mississippi State last year, Ole Miss this year. I don't know, maybe Alcorn, Southern Miss, Millsaps, Delta State, Mississippi Valley, Rust College. I'm just looking up other teams in Mississippi that maybe could give us a challenge sometime in the future. Chris, I want to start on the defensive side of the football, because we're going to get to Tyler Shough specifically, Texas Bowl MVP, walking bucket of nails, and overcoming early adversity with the turnover there early in the game. Should have been a touchdown for the Red Raiders, so you got a rebound from that. He obviously does. But I want to talk about Tim Deruyter and that defense, because the thing that really flashed to me was that we were hearing names called that weren't called that often during the regular season. We touched on it yesterday with guys like Pearson, Tyree Wilson, among others, that were not going to be there for you. What type of defensive effort could you really bring? And I don't know, statistically, I think they were just under 600 total offensive yards, yada, yada, yada. But the rushing game was essentially shut down. And when you're talking about guys like Jacob Rodriguez, Miles Cole, Isaac Harris, I'm probably going to miss some. And some of these guys I would have had to look up, in the program. Like, are these real names? Because they just weren't dudes we saw a lot during the regular season. But not only does it get you excited about what they did on Wednesday night in Houston, but man, I can't be the only Red Raider fan thinking about the future on that side of the ball with some of those guys, and then obviously the mainstays, the foundational pieces like Hutchings, Bradford, and so many others.
Yeah, I think that the defense, like so many times this year, helped set the tone in this game. I think Tim is really good at what he does, and his scheme is really fun to watch, in action. And to his credit, he got a bunch of kids that had not played hardly at all this year to really step up and play meaningful snaps in this game. Because, yeah, you had Isaac Smith, you had Jacob Rodriguez, who's played some, but Duda Banks, Harvey Dyson, I think Nate Floyd was in there. The depth just wasn't really there. And Tyler Owens, another one that had played sparingly this year just because of injury, and he's going to be really, really good for you next year. But I just thought those boys up front, I'm telling you, man, with those two defensive tackles coming back and a Deruyter, and if Miles Cole can take a step, I mean, it's easy to start looking at the reasons to be excited on either side of the ball and understand that Texas Tech, man, they're going to be a handful next year. Handful to deal with, and help is on the way. That's the fun part, is that what they've recruited is better than kind of what's here. And so that they hope to continue that. But man, Tim does such a hell of a job. I mean, to hold those two running, I mean, Judkins is one of the, I mean, he's a smaller version of like a Joe Mixon. I mean, he is as quick twitch and as fast. I mean, he's maybe the best one I had seen all year, just with some of the things that he could do out in space. But Texas Tech just really never let him get in space too much. And you mentioned the yards. That some of that is skewed by what happened toward the end of the game, and just kind of, not being able to shorten the game. But the point still stands. I mean, they controlled that running game for the better part of the night, and you really never got gashed. And I mean, it was just impressive. And I think they were really nervous about it going into that game. Tech was, and we talked about it on the broadcast. Man, you just like, you didn't have a whole lot of depth, and you're just holding on. But they just played so hard, man, and they won a lot of those battles up front, and it showed.
Yeah, Ole Miss winds up with just under 200 yards rushing on the day, but through the end of the third quarter, they had only 111. I mean, it was eye-popping. 3.3 average on the ground for that Rebel rushing attack that had been so good all year long, and I just can't emphasize enough you're doing it without some of your real run stoppers on that side of the football that you counted on in the regular season. And I mentioned some of those guys that maybe some fans are not all that familiar with, but aside from guys like Bradford and Hutchings, which, by the way, I saw Mayor Bradford, Tony Bradford, late in the game, up by 2 or 3 scores, I don't know, 17 points, whatever it was at that time. Tony Bradford makes a tackle maybe 25 yards down the field, Chris. Tony Bradford weighs about 500 pounds, if you hadn't noticed. And I just thought, that is the brand in motion, because that is a big man giving tremendous effort, who's an old head, who's seen it all, who could already be saying, hey, we're about to win this game. I'm ready to party. Give me the cigar. And a DT is making a tackle 20 yards down the field. I just thought that was really indicative of the great effort that team has given all year long. But those guys at the top of the statistical leaderboard for Texas Tech defensively can't go without mention, and that was Kosai Eldridge and Krishan Merriweather, who have just been as reliable as it gets at the linebacker position this year, particularly Merriweather throughout the year. Eldridge really ascended as the year went on, and, man, he capped off his year with maybe his best outing yet.
You're going to miss those two kids, man. I mean, yeah, so, as we go through some of the guys that are coming back, I mean, make no mistake, man, Krishan and Kosai, man, those two guys had a lot to do with the win versus Ole Miss, and just so much defensive success all year. Just healthy, steady, smart, available. I mean, yeah, I mean, they were a big reason why that running game just never got going. And they will not be easy to replace. But it was fun to watch a young guy like Jacob Rodriguez get in there, because he's just really good at football, man. I mean, keep in mind that kid was a quarterback in high school. He went to University of Virginia on a scholarship to be a quarterback, and now he's playing linebacker for you. And I think that, I mean, it's just wild. But I go back to Tim and what he was able to do with this particular group, and he's going to get so much of it back in year 2, and buy him some time being able to grow up some of these younger kids while these old guys come back. And it's kind of fun to watch that play out, because if you want to really push through, and try to win a conference championship, it's all about stability with your roster, with your coaching staff, all those things. And that's why Joey is such a great leader, because he's the first one to point out, credit to Tim Deruyter, credit to Zach Kitley, credit to his kids. He takes no credit. But yeah, you and I can sit here and give Tim and that side of the ball a ton of credit for what they did against an elite level running game. And you've been following Tech football for a long time, like I have, and been involved with it and all these things. There were times when you just prayed that you could stop somebody from running the ball. I mean, because it was just like, you just knew all a team had to do was like hand it off, and it's like, well, that's 6 or 7 yards. I mean, you just had no chance to stop it. But you've got real guys up front now, and they play really, really hard, and that's just a credit to the culture and the brand, as you said, with a guy like Tony Bradford.
Yeah, so process this, Locked On Texas Tech listeners, viewers, Red Raider fans, Joey McGuire son-in-laws, wherever you may be, future son-in-laws. We just began a show recapping a bowl win over an SEC opponent with a defensive conversation. Don't pinch yourself, because you ain't dreaming. That's real. But we'll flip the script coming up dead ahead. We'll get to the offensive side of things. We'll get to the Texas Bowl MVP. Man, so much to process from Tyler Shough's night. What an effort, what an impact, and what a significant announcement after the game that he's back in Lubbock apparently in 2023. So we'll dive into that entire ball of wax coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by BetOnline, the #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. So get the latest odds right now for every professional and amateur league out there, pro football, college bowl season, hoops, everything in between. They've got it all covered at BetOnline. Also, if you're into sports podcasts, and if you're not, but you're hearing this, are you lost? What are you doing? You're probably into sports podcasts, and you're going to find even more of those at BetOnline as well. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. It is the HQ Online for more props, odds, lines, stats, scores than ever before. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more with BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Always appreciate being your first listen, and we hope you'll make Locked On Sports Today your second listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. All right, Chris, we talked about the defense to start the show. Let's talk Tyler Shough and that Texas Tech offense. There were a lot of guys making impacts. Obviously, some of his targets as far as receivers, had some big hitters as far as the ball carriers were concerned. But let's talk about the Texas Bowl MVP, because he's had clearly a roller coaster of a ride in West Texas, injury on top of injury, including obviously this year to kick things off. He returns, he wins, he doesn't give the ball away, and then he caps it off with a huge win over Ole Miss. And I said it already, I just thought he was a walking bucket of nails, man. Couldn't be any happier really for any individual player, I don't think, than I am for Tyler Shough.
Yeah, and it's just fun to watch a kid like get to enjoy some of this because his tenure in Lubbock has been weird just because of injuries, and he's never really gotten to do what he wanted to do, was just play and like lead a team and maneuver his way through a season. But that kid, I mean, with what he was asked to do, he was the best player on the field last night, bottom line. And he was the leading rusher in this game, Casey. I mean, and when you're talking about a freshman All-Americans and the Judkins kid and Zach Evans, who's one of the fastest running backs that Texas Tech has seen all year, and with what they do on the ground game, for Tyler Shough to be the leading rusher in this game was just kind of spoke to the brand. It spoke to how good Tyler is, and I mean, and he avoided turning the ball over for the most part, but it's just like he gutted it out. And I know that you've heard that there about 24 hours ago you weren't real sure if he was even going to play. There was a food poisoning issue with several of the players. He was one of them, and Joey said after the game, hey, if we'd have kicked this thing off at 11 a.m. Yesterday, I'm not sure if he's able to play at all. But they got him calmed down and got him fixed and got some fluid in him and all those things. But I mean, just wild. But I mean, and he did. He stood up there on that stage right after it was over and said, "I got unfinished business. I'm coming back." I don't want to say that's 100% certain, but boy, that's pretty definitive because he's going to get some NFL conversation here in the coming days. But hey, man, I don't hate it. I hope he does come back. The key is you gotta keep Morton and Tyler, but we've got plenty of time to talk about all that as we go along in the coming weeks. But I just was without sounding corny, it's like you're kind of proud of Tyler. I mean, in a way, because I mean he's had a tough hand dealt to him the last couple of years, and even this year when he's just sitting there watching. And he doesn't get his job back initially because he wasn't quite ready physically. But for him to kind of come back and work to this point and finish it the way he did, it just makes you wonder what would this season have looked like if he's healthy and plays every game. And the way Ole Miss plays defense, you have to be able to run the football from a QB standpoint. You just have to, because they drop so many guys in coverage. They play a lot of cover 3, and there's some things there that you've got to take it and be willing to take it. And he just toughed it out. I thought some of the targeting things, excuse my language here, some of the targeting plays on him were bullshit. I mean, so some of that's just dirty and cheap by Ole Miss. And I would, if it was a one isolated incident, but it's like they hit him like 2 or 3 times that way. And other guys were called for targeting too. I mean, I think they reviewed 4 targeting penalties, called it. I think they ejected 2 players. There was one that was a blatant one early in the game that they didn't review, which I did not understood, but they called 15-yard penalty on it when he was down. But it's just tough because in some ways you're thinking you're lucky that he finishes the game because he got popped in the head twice. But it's just it's just a credit to him and Zach for putting him in a good spot, man. But he executed. And it was just fun to watch him run the ball.
Yeah, I thought not only did Ole Miss get beat, but they embarrassed themselves in the process. Could not be a proud day for that football program. Head coach doing what he does, the players doing what they did. I just thought it was some Bush League stuff, and I was disappointed in the Zebras for maybe not setting a higher standard for what should take place on the field. But neither here nor there. They can deal with that embarrassment throughout the offseason in Mississippi, which is just typically an embarrassing place to be.
And Calvin, think about this. Ole Miss loses 5 of their last 6 games, and the head coach is rewarded with a $9 million a year contract. I mean, process that. They've lost 5 of their last 6 games, and the administration at Ole Miss gives him $9 million a year in a brand new contract. I mean, it's crazy.
It is the land of Hugh Freeze, so there's been some.
I mean,
they've got a bear. They're the Rebels, but they've got a bear or a shark or something as a mascot. I mean, they're just to use some Mississippi jargon. They're just backwards. They're just backwards about every which way you slice it.
And I think Lane Kiffin is entertaining. I think I enjoy his antics at times. I just will say this. I thought that Ole Miss team was undisciplined. I thought they were dirty.
Yep.
I thought there's a lot of cheap shots. I thought the officiating crew was one of the worst I'd seen. It's an ACC crew. It's so much easier to talk about stuff like that after a win and kind of a commanding win because that's a really talented Ole Miss team. I mean, on paper, the Red Raiders, in some ways just don't match up at all. but I think culture still wins in college football. I mean, culture and like playing hard and togetherness and all the stuff the corny stuff that coaches talk about, it's real. And I thought that was on full display last night. And I know that there was some conversation after the game with some folks on the Ole Miss staff talking to the Tech staff about, hey man, credit to you guys for what you're building, because we're trying to do that here, and Lane Kiffin's in this is his third or fourth season at Ole Miss, but I think they were able to look across and kind of tip their cap, because Ole Miss tried to punk you, they tried to bully you.
Yeah.
They tried to do all those things, and the Red Raiders just weren't having it, and they didn't back down. And before we get off of Lane Kiffin, I want to say something very nice. I really appreciated his willingness to be a part of the Mike Leach tribute at the beginning of the game. Texas Tech, I believe it was Zach Kitley's idea. So shout out to Zach for coming up with the concept, and Joey kind of ran it up the flagpole, and they asked Lane Kiffin about doing it, but the delay of game penalty and kind of showing one of those basic air raid formations and then taking the delay game, I thought that was real classy for all involved. I just thought that hit the right note.
It was fun to
kind of be aware that was going to happen, that was in the works, and then watch it play out. But credit to Joey and Coach Kiffin for being a part of something like that. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was great, Chris. And Lane Kiffin can still teach his grandmother to suck eggs, for all I'm concerned. So terrific. I'm glad you mentioned that. But that's maybe not what I will remember most from the game. Hey, before we move away from the offensive side, Taj Brooks, 90 yards, had a big 37-yard hitter. Jaron Bradley, Loic Fungi. I mean, it was kind of a mirror, not necessarily with Brooks, but with Bradley and Fungi especially, kind of a mirror of what we talked about on the defensive side. Like, this is the future, or it should be at least. And yep. I was just thrilled to see those guys make an impact, especially those wide receivers.
Yeah, and they had we talked about that during the broadcast, that the conversation was, man, Loic had really practiced well in December, and we kind of heard this before. I mean, he's had a really good week of practice or whatever, but they kept saying, he's looked really good in December, and he's had really good practices. And I just think, Joey, they talk about that all the time, man. If you practice really well, usually it translates, and it sure did, because Loic looked like a different player. I thought he and Bradley, and those are two guys that still have it all in front of them. And it just kind of, you start to see some separation at that position, because I don't think J.J. Sparkman played. Trey Cleveland only got in the field a few plays, but it's pretty clear who your two best outside receivers are. And I think you'll see an announcement with an addition to that outside receivers group here pretty quick via the transfer portal here pretty quick. That's maybe going to be one of the fastest guys on the team, so that will certainly help. But yeah, Loic and Bradley, man, they did a really good job. And we thought before the game too that Sir Roderick was going to get the bulk of the carries, and it's not like you ran your running back duo a ton, because I think they only had about 21 or so carries between the two of them, but because it was Tyler Shough that really carried the load there.
Right.
Oddly enough, yeah. I mean, and obviously Taj will be back, and that was likely Sir Roderick's last game as a Red Raider. So anyway, man, just fun all the way around, man. You could talk about games like this for a long, long time.
Yes, we could, but we have limited time, because I believe Chris Level's actually sitting on the wing of a plane trying to get home at this point. You're not on Southwest, are you?
No, I'm not, thankfully.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. Coming up next with some bigger picture thoughts, we'll get back to the head coach, Joey McGuire, and what this season and what this bowl game to cap off this season means for this program moving forward. We will get to that coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by not being stupid behind the wheel. It can happen so easily. You're out with your friends or coworkers, kicking back a few. Few becomes too many. It's time to go. For a moment, you think of calling for a ride, but you decide you're a good enough driver to get through it. You live nearby. You can make it home okay. What's the big deal? What's the worst that could happen? You could kill someone, destroy their life, or the lives of all those around him. Yeah, probably that would be about a worst-case scenario. Only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. So play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride this holiday season. Drive sober or get pulled over. Back at it on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us again on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. We are basking in the glow of a 42-25 win for Tech over Ole Miss, and now starting to begin to think a little more big picture, Chris, as you obviously headed into bowl season with a boatload of momentum, 3 straight wins to finish the regular season. We're going to call it 4 now to finish the season overall. And Joey McGuire has a new contract, and he has what I would imagine to be the full-throated, undiluted support of the Red Raider fan base. I don't know how he couldn't at this point in time. And as we've talked about being happy for Tyler Shough, man, I don't know why I really feel this way, because I've become very jaded to the coaching profession, most of these hired guns, et cetera. Love them when they're doing good things for us, but I'm not going to bow at the altar anymore. And I'm not saying I'm there yet, but I was so happy for Joey McGuire because it just seems like the care factor, obviously, for him is 10 of 10, and that might actually be an understatement.
The guy he's one of the most genuine, invested guys you'll ever be around. And I just would say that Texas Tech football is in wonderful hands going forward, man. I mean, I think – I don't want to overstate it, but I think he's about to take this program and the fan base and everybody on one heck of a ride coming up in the coming years. And he just hits every right note, Casey. I mean, it's just all those kids love him. Those players, they play hard. It just speaks to anytime you say, man, those kids play so hard, and you can just see it. They're straining, they're playing hard. Look, Texas Tech, talent-wise, they're not very good, and I don't want to be disrespectful. There's just not a lot of pure talent. We talked about that all season,
yeah.
And in some ways, because you're not fast, you're not. You don't have a ton other than Tyree. There's not just a ton of NFL guys at all on either side of the ball. But they all play so hard and play so well together. It's a credit to Joey and what he's built. And I just think that like I said, that culture part of it is very real. And it sounds kind of cliche or corny or whatever, but it's a real thing, man. And you think about the season that they just had. They go 8-5. There was only one game that they were just really out of, and that was that Baylor game. And you turn it over 5 times, but they compete, and it doesn't matter who it is. They may be outmanned or outgunned, but Joey's just. I mean, he's the Texas Tech did a good job hiring him, man. I mean, that's all there is to it. They found a real one, and I can't wait to see where he takes this thing, because as he said it last night, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, and he's like Houston, Texas is West Texas. I mean, him being so respectful to Mike, him being so respectful to just the game and his kids, and just, I don't know, man. It's fun to watch beyond kind of to watch the start of what could be something really, really fun in the coming years, because the scary thing for other programs out there is that they weren't very talented this year, and they still won 8 games. And Casey, are you about to get pulled over? See, it's that hopefully you're not too much sauce and behind the wheel like you were.
No. That's just how they deliver coffee at the hotel I'm staying in Mexico.
I love it. But
Sorry to distract you.
No, you're good. But imagine what I was going to say was, imagine though when they do start getting real kids and real talent and all that. And again, I'm not trying to just be disrespectful about what because I mean, there's a credit to the kids on the team now for how well they played and how hard they played and all that stuff. But when you start to get faster and maybe a bit deeper and better up front and things like that, look out. I mean, look out.
Yeah, no question. I mean, there's a reason why we were talking about, a week or two ago, I think the best recruiting haul that you've had in about a decade. I mean, it is what it is. There's no disrespect intended to talk about a team that's not ultra talented or ultra deep. And really, who cares what that I imagine the players would feel like, who cares about that anyway, because we're getting the wins that we got in 2022. But it was amazing to see the way that they were able to pull together and I think really play above their heads a little bit. And that's what you get with great effort. And I think as a fan, sometimes you think that that's a given, that guys are going to play really, really hard, but it sure as hell is not a given. But they do under Joey McGuire, and it may become a given under Joey McGuire now moving forward. I thought it was hilarious after the game, Chris, post-game handshake. If you could pie chart how far each coach went to meet one another, Joey McGuire ran 90% of the way, was damn near on Ole Miss's sideline to shake Kiffin's hand when he's like crawling on the ground, crying in his post toasties or whatever. You can just tell who had a good time and who did not, because Coach McGuire went all the way to the other side to slap that hand and get on to the celebration. I know Joey McGuire creates his own momentum regardless of what is happening, but I've been calling him Joe Mo throughout the year because I just felt like even before you had played a game, somehow you had momentum just by virtue of his mere presence. And I know that would have been the case anyway, Chris, if you had finished, 6-6 or 5-7. I don't know if you didn't have the year that you wanted to have necessarily, but I am just drooling at the possibilities now on the recruiting trail when not only do you have that self-starting type of momentum, but you've got some proof of performance. You've got some skins on the wall, not only for Coach McGuire, but obviously his entire staff to sell now throughout the offseason.
Nailed it. Yeah, I mean it's kind of what we talked about before this game was even played a few weeks ago. You have facility upgrades, you have a recruiting class, now you have a new contract, now you have tangible success. So now look at what you can point to and sell. Now you have the brand. I mean, you just mentioned that a fifth-year guy, running down the field in a kind of a lopsided game at the end, making a tackle. That just sums up, who Joey is and what he's preaching and what he's coaching. And, I just, it's just fun. Because, I mean, after the game, I was around a few Tech fans and just, some different folks that you know and trust. And it was like, this is the best season we've had since 2008. And when you think about the context of it, I mean, Cliff's first year, you won 8 games that year, but you started out 7-0 and you kind of limped to the finish line before you beat Arizona State in the bowl game. Right. But I mean, this just feels different, and in a way, that bowl win against Ole Miss, in some ways, it was kind of, I don't know, reminiscent of what I felt like maybe the Holiday Bowl was in 2004, when you were kind of knocking on the door, and like that night against Cal, you kind of kicked it in. And it would set off, a several-year run where you were just really, really relevant, and it kind of build and build and everything. And some different kind. I'm just going off of recent memories and everything like that. But you just feel like, man, they're just setting the stage here for something really fun. So if you're out there, man, and you don't have season tickets next year, you better get them because the Jones AT&T is going to be the place to be next fall.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I would have to agree on looking back to some enjoyable seasons, going back to the end of the Mike Leach tenure. And the Cliff year was just such a weird year because you win all those at the front. You don't win any at the end. Then you beat Arizona State in the Holiday Bowl, and you think, okay, well, is this momentum? And it wasn't really. But yeah, it was nothing to compare to this. And I'm having a hard time entertaining any thoughts, Chris, that I know some Tech fans are wanting to entertain as it relates to comparing contract extensions for first-year head coaches and things like that. I feel totally different about this one for some reason with Joey McGuire as compared to that conversation with Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah, and this is something that I think Tech, they presented this to Joey. He wasn't really aware of it. And I think he just, there's not a whole lot of negotiation here. It's like, yes, sir. I mean, kind of, and I think he said it after the game, kind of, he was telling the story, and he's like, he told Kirby, I'll earn every penny. And I don't think anybody out there would dispute what the guy says when he talks about that, because he's just a relentless ball of energy. And it's just, you just feel so good about the direction of who's in charge. It was just a really good last 24, 36 hours for just Texas Tech in general, but specifically the football program in so many ways. But yeah, you just feel really good about where this thing's going.
Man, those are a lot of pennies to earn, so he's got a lot of work to do. Best of luck. Best of luck on that. But I've got some optimism that he's going to do it. All right, Chris, we got to let you go so you can make your way back to the 806, man. I'm sure you enjoyed your night in Houston, and we always enjoy the insights and perspectives, so appreciate the time as always.
Man, I appreciate you be willing to do this on short notice, and neither one of us had a lot of sleep. It's just that the game ended about 5 or 6 hours ago, it feels like. So, but I hope everybody out there has a happy new year. We'll get back in a normal routine once the holidays are over with here, and onward and upward from here, man. But keep hope alive, and safe travels for you too, getting home from Mexico.
Yes, sir. We got Big 12 hoops, my man. Next time we're gathering, we're going to be talking conference basketball. So we're going to stay busy here on Locked On Texas Tech. Make it your first listen each weekday on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. That's Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Texas Tech.